Bridging Gaps, the business podcast with Deborah Levitt, sharing the challenges and stories of fellow business owners. Hello, my guest today is Penny Power, OBE. Penny is the CEO and founder of the Business Cafe, and I'm really delighted that she's agreed to join me here today. Hi, Penny.
Hiya.
It's really great to have you here. Thank you very much for taking the time to join me.
You're very welcome.
So, Penny, I know you've been through, a lot of different things with, Academy and how you've progressed through since that point, and that now you're focused on the Business Cafe. And I was wondering if you'd like to just share a little bit about what the Business Cafe is, where you're at with it, and how it's going.
So, great question. I'll try not to dominate the rest of the show, just talking about that though. So it's a real passion purpose for myself and my business partner, Gail. We've both been in sort of self-employment or building businesses for the last 25 years. And we know how hard it is. And I think the two big things that can hit people is loneliness and skills, the need for those two things. And I particularly resonate with and love and think the bravest of people in this economy are the self-employed people and the freelancer, the sole trader and the small business, and the mindset and the skills of those people. So the Business Cafe is to bring a home to the high street or to a town centre that's an alternative to Costa or Starbucks, where it really celebrates the business person and gives them a home where they feel they matter and where they can pop out of their house, sit and have a nice coffee. It's not co-working, sit and have a nice coffee and know that there's a friendship first culture in it. But additionally to that hopefully will start to reduce loneliness and make people feel that they matter. You walk in, hi Deborah, lovely to see you. There's a community manager in there. There's staff who are all trained to care. And so that might help to combat loneliness. I think it really could. Certainly would have helped me, which is where the idea came up in 2013 when I felt quite lonely. But the other issue is productivity and the skills that we need. And I think one of the things I find so overwhelming, which is just the keeping relevant, keeping up, and the skills that we constantly need, and the breadth of skills that we have that we can't delegate necessarily, or even finding the right person to delegate to as a subcontractor. And so we want to give free skills, which is the average earner of a freelance self-employed person's country is 27,000. They can't afford to go out and get skills and choose the best workshops to go on. And we want to just give them little bite-sized one-to-one training for free on bookkeeping apps and maybe project management apps. And it's just enough to get them started. And then they can go and find the specialists in their town who can then help them to become really good at that skill, just to get them over the hump.
So, because one of the things that I'm very aware of is that there's so much information out there these days. If I go on to Google and search project management or, finance, just tons of information, and it's really easy to become overwhelmed by too much information and not knowing what's right for you.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a channel problem for the people like Sage and Xero and all these people in the old days, not Xero because they've only been a digital software as a service company, but other software providers used to just sell it and it would sit on the shelf in PC World, and whether you used it or not didn't matter to them. And now we need to find a way for you to feel comfortable downloading and accessing software, which helps them as an industry, but also importantly helps the small business. And I think you're absolutely right. The advice even on bookkeeping, you can go from free agent, that's great for the solopreneur, all the way through to Xero and Sage and more complex ones, deciding on your ambitions as a company and knowing where to start and navigate that and feeling safe to connect up and integrate into your bank account. And, it's big decisions. And but even Facebook advertising, we spent 26 hours trying to learn how to do Facebook advertising. And if somebody could have just sat next to us for an hour, we'd have been up and away, and that would have given 25 hours of productivity back to us. So, and what we're not wanting to do, we're wanting to feed the businesses with leads and opportunities by just getting people away from apathy and fear onto actually just starting to download and register and use these a little bit. And then they'll need people like you to help them with project management skills and understanding the soft skills as well as the hard skills around that.
So it's really to enable people to take the first step.
Yeah, it
and
really
then
yeah.
Okay. And within the cafe itself, what makes it different from going to my Starbucks? You know, what's going to make it worthwhile for me to come there if I've already got my favorite seat at, you know, whichever one it is?
Well, I think so. The business model, we're not expecting world domination or for you to never go to Starbucks or Costa just because it's a business cafe. So I think you might still go to Starbucks and Costa and your independent coffee shop that you like. So it's just when you're in that mindset where I'd quite like to sit amongst other business people.
Mm-hmm.
You're not having to pay anything extra for that coffee. It's a business lounge environment. There are no children, much as I adore children. Sometimes it's not appropriate. You know that everybody in there has gone through some induction so that they understand that this is about the community and about talking to one another. And, you know, when I was sitting in Costa in October 2013 and I came up with the idea, I tried to talk to a couple of people in Costa and Farnham, and I think they thought I was trying to seduce them. You know, it just felt so peculiar to them. It's like talking to someone in a tube or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to create an environment where you can be quite comfortable talking to the person next to you. And also, you know, evening events and things that can go on that can make us feel part of the fantastic ecosystem of small businesses. And I think of, you know, when I've done some of my work, there's, say in Farnham, there's 2,500 small businesses that I could possibly earn enough money out of those people, but I can't find them. You know, so I have to commute to London because somehow that's where my network sits. But I want to feed and learn from and pass business to my local economy.
And I think it's quite easy to, you know, even if you go out and you start connecting with those people, if you're not connecting in a way that is establishing that friendship, that relationship, you are just another person that can be seen as wanting their money as opposed to them recognizing the value that you can bring.
Yeah.
And it's really challenging.
It is. And I in 1998, you know, I think I was, without blowing smoke up my bottom, I was one of the first, you know, I was the first social network in the world with the Academy, and I really evangelized the online world. And I really bought into Sir Tim Berners-Lee, you know, 29 years ago this week. He gave birth to the World Wide Web, and I bought into his internet's force for good. But there's no denying that we've perhaps gone into the online world in an addictive way. And I know, in fact, this week I've had to re-establish my own pattern because I've had a tough couple of weeks. And my first thing would always be to grab my phone and go through Instagram and Facebook. And if I'm not in a good place and I see everybody else looking like their life is just awesome, it just kills me it kills my energy. And whilst I would love to celebrate everybody having great lives, it makes me feel small. So I'm using myself as a bit of a metaphor, but I feel these things. We all do, you know, from the teenager through to this 80-year-old man who's wondering why all his friends are playing golf and he's not, he's sat at home. You know, we all feel isolated. We all feel small at times. And I think we have to rebalance it. I think there's a place for it. But this week when I was looking at everybody, you know, and celebrating their awards and their book launches and their this and their, you know, House of Lords this and their, I was thinking, God, you know, I've really got to up my game. And that day I wanted to go and sit in a business cafe. I didn't want to sit at home all day, and I didn't want to go and sit in Starbucks. And do you know what? I actually ended up going and sitting in my local church. So I think that sometimes we want to get out of the house. I love working at home. I love the fact I've got my dog and my candle and flowers around me and my atmosphere, and I can switch the telly on for background sometimes, and I can go and lie on my bed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I need a rest or whatever. I love all that. I don't want to necessarily go and hot desk in a co-working space, but I would like to know that I could go and sit amongst other business people sometimes.
It's about flexibility, isn't it? It's about what's right for you at that particular point in time, as opposed to having to commit to, I'm going to take an office or commit to a desk space in co-working, or, you know, if I don't claim my seat at my local cafe, then I don't get it. So I've got to be there at 9 every morning. So it is about being able to choose. And I know that for me, I have a range of places that I go to, and some that I go if I've got, you know, the dog with me and I know I can take him, some that I go to when I don't have him because he's not allowed. And And sometimes I'm at home. So it's a real choice.
It's flexible, isn't it? It's flexible working.
Yes.
And I think that's a real essence of, you know, I think one of the biggest things when you decide to go into business is learning very early on how you manage your mental state. You know, resilience, you may be a resilient person, but you never know how resilient you are until you've had a lot of doors banging in front of you. And you have to self-motivate every day and create the discipline of still getting out of bed, even though you're not getting out of bed for any reason. And I think your mental state is really, really important. And so we really have to think about our own mental state and make sure that feeling anxious doesn't become anxiety, feeling a bit low doesn't become depression, feeling a bit busy doesn't make us feel stressed. You know, we have to be the governor of our own emotions in that way. And there's no doubt about being connected into great communities of people, online and offline, can help us balance that, because it can make us feel we matter. But I think we have to realise that, you know, flexible working is really important. I mean, I've been up since 2:30 this morning working. And it just so happens that my brain switched on at 2:20 this morning, and it switched on really powerfully. And I knew that was the next 4 hours was going to be stonking. It's meant that as soon as you and I finish, I'm packing up. I'm gone. I'm going to do some ironing, and I'm gone. I know I haven't got any more capacity in it, and I don't feel guilty about that. And I think we have to understand how our own biochemistry works, and not work to the 9-to-5 regime that if we've come from corporate we think we have to work within.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've seen as well, is that while, you know, we leave corporate because we don't want to be in that environment,
Yeah.
and yet the perception is still that to be successful you have to be a corporate. So you almost are putting yourself right back into that.
Yeah, exactly. So my husband just come home.
I could see you going, sure. And so we put ourselves back, and to take that step back and to say, do you know what? You know, so for me, I don't work well. Mornings are not a strong time for me for lots of different reasons. And to go, actually, if I start at 10, I have a much better day and I'm much more productive in the afternoon than I am in the morning. So why make myself, you know, occasionally, yes, but that's what works for me. And that's one of the reasons for why.
Don't feel guilt about that, because that's one of the joys of making these decisions. You've got the sacrifices you have to make in order to have a lifestyle that suits your constitution. And it's very important. And, you know, I did a blog about how often do you give yourself a duvet day. You know, I know that even my kids, when they're at school, I said, don't manifest an illness just because you need a day off. You know, if you're tired, just have a day off and I'll give you a TV day. And actually, amazingly enough, they didn't need that many because they knew they need, you know, and they weren't very ill very often because of it. And I think that we have to think about that and be our own boss in that way. And I think, you know, if I was working in a corporate, I would have a day a week that I could work at home, and I would ease up on that day, and I would have sick leave, and I'd have 5 weeks holiday. And I think that, you know, if occasionally you need that duvet day and you just need to lie in bed and watch Netflix all day, then give yourself it, because the next day you'll feel better. And you can't just keep fighting on. You've got to manage your energy.
And it's very much that I think, as I don't know if it's typical to Britain or if it's just general people working, that we tend to want to fight on. We don't want to give in to that cold. We don't want to give in to the snow. We just want to keep pushing, rather than saying, do you know what? The sensible approach and what's going to be best for me, and probably for everything therefore around you, is to have a duvet day, or to, you know, do a shorter day, whatever it is. And it can be really difficult to make those decisions and still to go, but actually I am still doing a good job.
Yeah. And it comes back to input versus output. You know, when you're working in a corporate, they're monitoring your input. You know, when did you log on? When did you log off? You know, whereas I think when you work for yourself, I mean, I watch my daughter. She can achieve in a day and a half what would take a lot of people 5 days. She is the most incredibly intense. She's a sprinter in that sense. She can, but then she'll tire out. she's not a marathon runner. And I think that we all have, you know, not only different days that we flow, you know, times of the day we flow, it's also, you know, sometimes Friday is a day we need to have off, or a Monday or a Wednesday or whatever. And we have to learn to, you know, work to our own rhythm. And that's really important. And that whole subject of productivity, which is your expertise, you know, if you're really productive, you know, then, you know, either use the extra time you get from being more productive to sell more, or use it to have time in your life.
Yeah, exactly. And to keep that balance, whatever it means to you.
Yeah.
So Penny, with the business cafe, obviously this is at a very early stage in terms of, you know, looking to open the first cafe and get that up and running. How has it felt to be at the start of something again, and to be going through the challenges, having already been very successful?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on how you define success. So, you know, when in '98, I had this dream of the way that business people could become friends. And obviously I used the online platform to encourage that. Now I feel the local agenda and offline friendship is really important. And I think I love all the networks. I was at Fab Women yesterday, as you know, helping them launch that. And I love the offline networks. So, and I have, you know, I've been awarded my OBE, and I've got obviously managed to build a brand, but I've got a long way before I actually, you know, we got disrupted. You know, Academy does not still go anymore. And we still have Academy members that say, when's Academy 2.0 coming back? Because it was a very special culture. It was a lovely, lovely place. And I think LinkedIn's great. I think Facebook's great. I think Twitter's great. There was something quite special about the way that the Academy, when we have 5,000 offline events a year, and it was very special. It was very special. So I've had a big pause in that dream, a 6-7 year pause in that dream from when we sold Academy, and it didn't continue to be executed well by the people that bought it, through to now when I want to launch the Business Cafe. It is really hard. I mean, I think I'm finding it very, very hard to find the investment. It's a capital intensive business, so we need to have money to get them going. And an investment works both ways. It's not just somebody offering you money, it's knowing that the person offering you money is the sort of person you want to go into business with. And so finding the right sort of people that understand this, and it's again another new concept, and for people to get what we're trying to do. So that is hard, but we're, you know, very determined. We've got a lot of interest in it, and we just have to keep going until we find the right backers to be able to scale it and do it the way we want to do it.
And how hard is it to walk away from an investor who you don't feel is right? Because and I know you've done that recently, but on a different scale, I think people who are starting up have an idea of who their client is, but also have that fear of not earning money, and are therefore find it really difficult to say no to somebody who might be offering to hire them, even though they know they're wrong. So it's well, hopefully an approximation.
You know, I've made some serious wrong decisions in business based on scarcity, and I think as your life goes through its different challenges, you know, my 3 kids now are pretty independent. One left at university, and he's pretty independent. The other 2 are now self-sufficient. So I can make decisions that are a little bit more based on abundance than scarcity. So the decisions I had to make several years ago around people I worked with and investors I brought in were short-term gain to get me over humps, but they gave me a lot of long-term pain.
Okay.
And I think we have to accept sometimes we make decisions, we take on clients, we work with people, we might take on investors that we have to do it in scarcity. And we have to just appreciate the reasons we made those decisions and move on and positively surrender from that relationship as soon as you can when you've got yourself into a more abundant position. But I think that if you can understand your own values and work on your gut and think, is this person somebody that I could spend time with, whether it's a client, a supplier, or an investor? And if it's not somebody, so I've just walked away from a potential investor, the person that this investor was going to put on the board would have just been a nightmare. And I don't want to build that type of toxic. If you build that toxicity at the top of a business, that leadership style can really affect all the way through. So it is hard. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I said I've just had coming through tough 2 weeks, and there's no doubt about it, because to find an investor, go through the due diligence and get to that point can take 6-9 months. And then you're starting all over again. And I say to my kids, 4 years of this now, it's like constantly failing your university degree and then thinking, right, I've got to get the books out again and start studying again. And I know I need about 6 or 7 days to recover before I can open the books again and start studying again when I've had a disappointment.
And do you give yourself that time?
I think I do now, yeah. I'm just coming through it. I think that's why I woke up with a big at 2:20 this morning. Yeah. And learn from it and think what's the learning here, and I do. I think I've become richer and more skilled each time, and stronger. And I sort of but that bounce back ability is what makes an entrepreneur. And it's something I just talked recently on this subject into a large company, and they were saying they desperately need the resilience of an entrepreneur in their large companies. And you learn that.
And I think the larger companies are starting to realize that the way that they've historically worked is maybe not the way that they need to work in the future, not just for them to be continuing to grow and be successful, but also because of the people and the way that people think and work these days. Yeah. And coming through the schooling system with all the digital is really changing attitudes overall.
Yeah, and I think people are becoming hypersensitive. People need kindness, and people need more love around them at work. And if your corporates are having to adapt to a sensitivity of individuals where they've got this big agenda around mental health, what's causing those problems? And I think one of the ways that you can help to reduce it is by at least creating a loving, kind environment, not a hard, coarse environment. And that old style leadership and of management and leadership has to shift, because we're all hyper sensitive now. I think there are very few people that don't have that level of sensitivity that requires people to be a little bit more considerate.
And it is so important, because we look at people who have burned out and people who are now saying, well, hang on a second, I didn't burn out because there was a problem with me. I burnt out because the environment I was in led to a problem, and to be making sure that that doesn't happen. And one of the things I'm really conscious about is that we keep talking about mental health and mental well-being and saying you should be able to speak about it. But exactly as you've said there, ideally, you wouldn't need to be speaking about it, because you would be preventing it. You'd be actually saying we're creating an environment where, yes, problems and things occur, but you're doing as much as possible to make sure people are in that supportive environment and that they've got the things they need to be happy and healthy.
Yeah. And away, a lot of people I talk to say they find that they're trying to run away from fear rather than run towards love and joy. And you have to create an environment, no matter how small your business is, even the way you treat your suppliers and customers in a tiny business. I think, the way that you treat and communicate with people it says so much about your brand and your company values. And I think there is a danger. I spent some time yesterday with somebody who wanted some advice, because she's creating a coaching business around resilience, and she's not hyper qualified. And she was telling me about the sort of people she helps. And I said that I recently decided to start seeing a psychiatrist, because I wanted to talk to her about trolling and understand, how to detect a psychopath and a sociopath in business. And I was using it as education, but, a lot of stuff, pain from the past came back through talking to her. But what I really liked about her is as she held my mental state, she didn't catastrophize things. She didn't exaggerate things. She we've talked a lot about this spectrum of moments for anxiousness, which we will all have, and adrenaline boosts up because you're supposed to go into alert state if something is making you anxious, through to the spectrum of, have you got anxiety? And the moment of, I feel a bit low, which I would say the last 2 weeks I felt a bit low. Somebody could have said you got depression, but I felt a bit low, and that's fine, because I can't expect every day to be a high. And then, I remember my daughter first saying to me that she was stressed when she first started working. She said, I was so stressed, and I took that really seriously. And she was about 22, and I said, oh, well, have we got to talk this through, darling? What's making you so stressed? And well, it wasn't. She was very busy. And we've got to not catastrophize. And I think that we've got to be very careful of this mental health agenda and who we lend our brains to when we go and ask for help, because people can feed off that and catastrophize it. And we've got to check that.
And one of the things that worries me is when things become an excuse as well. So that anxiety that you might be feeling, and as you said, we all feel anxious in various situations, but even if it's become anxiety, then using it as a reason not to do things, it's very easy to become very insular and to be, well, I can't do that. You don't understand. I've got this, as opposed to, how am I going to find a way around it? How am I actually going to achieve what it is that I want to do, rather than be, trapped by it?
Yeah. Somebody once told me that the definition of happiness that was studied was 50% of our happiness comes from our constitution. And so if we're not a happy person, then we need some serious work done, because there may be some real things that have affected us that stopped. 10% comes from the achievement of the things we want in life, and that's always moving, because we can never be fully satisfied. That's what helps us to keep innovating and progressing as humans. 40% comes from the level of control that we have over the decisions and the people we spend time with and our life. And so we have to, and when somebody told me that, that's when I made a decision to positively surrender to the investors I had in the RAS business, because I realized they were bullies, and the level of control that they were having wasn't allowing me to use my brain, use my thoughts, use my vision. And I think we need to take control of ourselves. And that's one of the joys of self-employment or small business, is that's what that gift is. And we have to know that we've got that and use it.
Yeah, exactly. And that you can make those decisions, and you live with the impact of those decisions. So.
Yeah.
So Penny, if you were speaking to somebody who is in a small business, what kind of tips or advice would you give them to, one, in terms of overcoming, you mentioned that, every time there's a setback, it can feel like a failure, and how they keep, persevering through those and bouncing back.
Yeah. But this might be a bit of a big answer here to start with. So a bit of a Ronnie Corbett, if anybody knows that story. But a couple of weeks ago, when I presented at a large consulting house for speech, and they were asking me about resilience, and afterwards I talked to these sort of grads that were in their sort of second year of their grad program with this company, and they were saying, it's really hard working here, and eventually I'm going to start my own business. And I said, do you think that'd be easier? And they said, oh yeah, this is really hard. And I said, why do you think it'd be easier? And they said, well, it's just, I'm being pushed so hard here in the hours. And I said, don't ever underestimate the fact that you never have to go out and get a client. And I think anybody starting out in business, we usually start from a point of view of, we've got a skill. We've got a skill in project management, we've got a skill in graphic design, we've got a skill in digital marketing, we've got a skill in accounting or bookkeeping, or whatever it is, we've got a skill. Very few people have the skill to sell. And it is the most important thing you do. I mean, once you've got your client, holding on to them and delivering great service. And I think that my first thing is that you've got to learn how to sell and feel comfortable with it. And that took me a long time to do that, because it's very hard to sell yourself. You could sell somebody else till the cows go home, but to sell yourself is really hard. But once you get a lead, if somebody does refer to you, so I had this shocking experience where I said to a girlfriend, well, no, she was a business colleague who runs a business network in Farnham. I said to her, I think if I'm thinking about writing another book, and I said this time before I write it, I'm going to set up the infrastructure around who's going to help me with my PR, who's going to help me boost up my social media, because I just haven't got time to do it all. And so I said, could you recommend anybody to help me with my social media? And she said, yeah, I think I can. I've never used her, but I've heard she's good. So she put a referral through. Now, this would probably have been about an £800 a month retainer, right?
Yeah, so good size, bit of work.
Yep. And so she introduced me on an email to this lady. Here is a lead, a hot, warm, gorgeous lead. And this person replied within about 20 minutes, fantastic, but cut and paste off her website, her service levels, hadn't looked me up on Google, didn't personalize it at all, and didn't even know that I'd got my OBE for my digital experience. And was saying things like, the most important thing is that I train you up on what social media is. And so she completely killed it, because so we have to understand the sales process. And when we go networking, and when we're online, and people who blatantly sell online, we know that's revolting. But I think there is now a trend towards quite a manipulative way of selling online as well. And I think we need to be given skills in how to sell, how to open and close business. And if you haven't got it, go and get it. But that, to me, is the most important thing, because you probably naturally know how to deliver a business. But what we do is we will spend time doing the stuff we're good at easily.
Yes.
Shy away from the stuff that we're not very good at. And till you know how to get a client and close a client, you're not in business.
And you're right, that's an absolute challenge. It's so easy to focus on all of the other things that you either enjoy or you're good at, and you just, sort of, because I know when I started initially and I went into a business development group, and I phrased it as essentially what I've done is I've put all of the structure in place, and I'm now sitting in a darkened room with the lights off, the blinds down, and the door locked, and wondering why nobody's coming to me.
Yeah.
And it's that putting yourself out there. And it is incredibly difficult. I remember the first talk I did as myself, as my own business. And I was really nervous. And I was thinking, why am I so nervous? I've done, lots of presentations before. And it was because it was about me. So as you say, it's really critical to get that selling bit. And
it is. And you get that chance to a talk, which is fantastic. People like to hear the real story behind you, the why you did it, the vulnerabilities you have. I mean, I've given business to people when I've found out that they're struggling and they need the business, and they've said to me, I really need this business. I'm trying to educate my child because they're being bullied at a state school, and I want to be able to afford to send them into, the story is so important, and why you've gone into that business, why project management matters to you, why being a resilient coach matters to you. Most people do things, A, because they're good at it, and B, because they've overcome their own problems. And that empathy, and that people want to know your story.
And everything I'm hearing now backs that up as well. So many people going into to the business of helping you to write your story and helping you to get it across and to be authentic and really sharing what you're about, rather than being another anonymous figure who just says, yes, I can sort out your Google SEO for you.
Yes. And put, there are many websites and Twitter accounts I go to, and I can't see who the person is behind it. And I think the people are tweeting me all the time, and they've just got a logo, and they act like they know me, and I've probably met them, but I have absolutely no idea who they are. They're chatting away to me, and I'm thinking, who are you? I can't see it.
And I think it's really easy to forget it. And because I know that I was speaking to somebody fairly recently, and who, when I met him, we had this conversation, and he said, oh, hang on, we were talking on Facebook. And I said, yes, that's right. We're in the same group. And then realized that I've got a picture on Facebook, which is of my brother and I when we were little, because every time I look at it, it makes me smile.
Yeah.
But of course, if you haven't met me and you're only talking to me on Facebook, you have no idea who I am. And I'm still resisting taking that one down because I do like it.
No, but your face is your brand, and it should be so easy for someone to recognize you across all the platforms.
To see who you are. So I'll have to go in and change.
Otherwise, it's like me being a different person when I walk into a pub, to a cafe, to going into Boots and Smiths. I'm a different person. I would have no connection to Farnham as a town if I had a different face on every time I walked through the door.
That's very true. Hadn't thought of it that way. So in terms of, we've talked around the business and the importance of being able to sell and the vulnerability and walking away from things.
Yeah.
What about the aspects, what would you suggest, or how do you make sure that you do get the balance in life and that you're looking after your well-being and continuing to stay well?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's about stage in your life. When the kids were little, and they were my priority, my marriage and my children really important to me. You can't do everything. So I didn't have much social life. And so I was quite lonely. I had loads of business friends, but, I didn't have time to do the tennis, the Pilates, because I would have to given up time in the evening that I wanted to spend with my children in order to do that. And so I don't think I did look after myself particularly well when the kids were growing up, because I try to eat healthily, but I think it was just time. Just that, what can you do? Now I'm a bit older and they're grown up. I'm sort of trying to learn to do that, and I think I've always believed in massages and reflexology.
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually see these things as a huge luxury. I think they keep me on the road, a bit like making sure that I put oil in my car. I think that, and of course, spending £70 a month or whatever that I might spend on reflexology or a massage is an extra cost, but I think it's in my investment in me that I need. And the healthy eating and the making sure I don't drink too much, and more rest and not feeling guilty about that rest. Creating boundaries. I have always believed that you need your weekends. So even right back to the beginning of the academy days, if I was asked to do anything at weekends, I would say no. I just think that, I can put my all in during the week, but it's very, very, very exceptional I'd give up a weekend. So, if I'm asked to do speeches at weekends, I don't do it. And I think that comes down to understanding your own boundaries and what you're capable of doing, and just not being all things to all people.
And has it been hard to maintain those boundaries?
My biggest boundary I find really hard to maintain is how much people ask me to do things for free. I think that's a plague of being self-employed. And I think I think that's my biggest weakness, is being able to say no to people. And partly because I want to stay relevant and know that people still know who I am, because your brand and reputation is really important, and partly because I want to help people, and so knowing when to say no is really hard. And so I would say my boundaries around that aren't brilliant, but I think some people have helped me. So for example, people will always ask me to read their books and do a reference on them, a testimonial. Hundreds of people have asked me to do that. And my daughter one day said, "Mum, do you really read their books? Do you really read them?" I said, "Well, I scan them, darling." She said, "It makes me feel a bit sick about that." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because people look at this book and think, oh, Penny Power recommends it. And you're not actually recommending it, so you can't see it." So I said, "That's a really good point." So now when somebody asks me, I say, "You're going to have to pay me to read the book. It's going to take me a day to read your book. And that's a day out of my life. And I will read it, and therefore it's authentic. And therefore, when you launch it, I can write a proper Amazon testimonial. I can properly tweet about it." And so that sort of thing has come in. But I think that all of us self-employed people struggle with being asked to do things for free all the time. And I think we've got to get good at knowing when it's right and when it is wrong, not, because you will get exploited.
And recognizing the value in what you do and the value in that time. So as you say, in that day that you've now lost, reading something that you may or may not have been interested in the first instance, it is being able to say, yes, that this is going to cost. And I think a lot of people, and I'm trying to figure out at the moment whether it is mainly women or men as well, feel that kind of imposter syndrome where they're thinking, well, why should I charge them? Why would they pay for me to do that? Because, what value am I really bringing?
But the world doesn't want another poor person. And do you know what? I've been caught out so many times where I've done a speech and then I've discovered somebody else was paid $2,000 and I wasn't. And what I have really learned is that a lot of rich people are rich because they're as tight as a gnat. And they know how to make money. And, it's the same with charities and things. The people who give money are the ones that have got the least. And so just always think that you potentially are being massively exploited. And if they don't value you, then don't value them.
Mm-hmm.
And don't be embarrassed to say, I need to make money. That's what makes the world go round. I can't ask Waitrose to give me free food, or Sainsbury's or Asda to give me free food for the next week.
No, well, you can, but they might likely to say no. So, and in terms of all of the things that you've got on your plate, all of the things that you're juggling, do you find that you're able to, I guess, keep on top of the things that are priority, or do you find that you have trouble, remaining productive or getting your plans in place?
Yeah, I think that is definitely something that we all suffer from. I remember Roger Hamilton talking about being in your flame or your wax and knowing, that there are things in your business life that you have to do that's like the wax of a candle and it shrinks and you hate it. And then there are times when you're in your flame. I think learning how to delegate and learning the skills of project management and knowing what the priorities are really important. And that's a skill that maybe I could get a lot better at. But I have got a business partner now, and she is absolutely fantastic. And whereas we've got very similar values around what we're doing, but whereas I'm more sales and marketing and brand and community, Gail is very much finance and ops. And whereas I need people and I like to go out all the time to meet people, she loves being at home, sitting in front of a computer, doing the project management, the processes and stuff. And I don't think you can't be skilled at it all. It's really hard. And I think, if you can get your business to a point where you can start bringing in some people who have the skills that aren't yours, then it might create some short-term cash flow pain for you, but it should help you to catapult your business if you do that.
That is really great, Penny. Thank you very much.
No, you're very welcome.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say just before we wrap up?
No, I think make sure that you do recognize that you're in business, and it's a serious thing being in business, and you have to understand the money, cash flow, learn how to sell. I think that is really important. But, really celebrate it and know that you are the bravest of people in the economy, and stand tall with that. Don't let anybody make you feel small.
That is wonderful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
You've been listening to Deborah Levitt on Bridging Gaps, the Business Podcast.